So this is our expert series, and our expert series is all about the experts. It's nothing about us. So you are not going to hear a lot from me talking about what we do. You're going to hear a lot from me asking Emma about what Emma does, and Emma's one of our experts today. And really important in terms of just general etiquette on this. We are here to try and share great knowledge with the world, and we'll record this, we'll get this out as well, so our team will pull some snippets together, but it is all about sharing that expertise and getting that out there. So I'm Nick, I'm the CEO of the People Experience Hub, and that's all you're going to hear from me on that subject. Emma, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, Nick. Very happy to be here. Always really enjoy our conversation. So I'm really happy to be here. Like you said, it's kind of pseudo Friday, so we're all feeling very relaxed today. So my background is started life as an academic, as a psychologist, behavior change psychologist, and I lectured in academia and did research projects. I worked in the field of sexual health, which is really interesting. Got lots of stories there. Probably better over a beer or something. Thought I'd do that forever, actually. Loved it. And then decided to move from the Northwest to Brighton, and there weren't any lecturing jobs going. So ended up falling into the corporate world in about 98. And I was kind of brought in because of my background in psychology to set up the first ever survey for what then became EDF Energy. But I kind of looked after this really weird portfolio of stuff. So I looked after internal comms and the employee volunteering program. We set up a wellbeing program, the survey, obviously. And it was just a really weird, weird portfolio of stuff to be looking after. And I used to go to conferences and speak to people, and they'd be like, "What? That's really weird." Anyway, I eventually discovered that all the things I was doing were could come under the title of employee engagement and employee experience. So that was kind of my background. So I fell into it. Did 10 years in-house, loved it, worked for big corporates, 3 different big corporates in-house, and then set up People Lab 15 years ago. And we are an employee engagement and experience consultancy. Work with clients all over the world, lots of really exciting, sexy brands and lots of brands you would never have heard of, but really all about helping companies to get it right with their people, to help people have great experiences at work, and absolutely love the work I do and very grateful I get to do it.
Amazing, I love that. And there's something you missed, which is Muso. So
Yes.
musician as well.
Yeah. So I know we've had lots of conversations about the music side of things, and one day we will do the band. But yeah, I played bass guitar in a band in the 90s, and we actually got a record deal, which I can't believe we did, really. And we were an little indie band called Formula One. We got to play Reading Festival a couple of times, which was amazing. I got to tour with some bands that went on to become quite well known, like Snow Patrol and Travis. And yeah, we had a record deal. We released an album. We released about 6-7 singles. So that was really exciting, and that fitted in really well with being a lecturer, because you know lecturing is kind of like, it's not part-time, of course, but back in the day, I had lots of free time to do the band. So that was brilliant fun. And it set me up really well to deal with, the corporate world, because I think once you've been in a band and you've been with celebrities, the chief executive isn't quite as scary. So yeah.
Yeah, when there's a mosh pit versus versus the CEO. I love it. And if we do form the band, I will play the triangle. So yeah, and every so often just get the little ding in. Yeah, I'm there for that.
I know you've got quite a few musos in the People Experience Hub team there, haven't you? So
Ted plays every instrument and bounces around. Rob sings. So Rob's only just stopped singing in a band. I can't sing. I can play the beginning to Enter Sandman on the guitar, and I can play NIB by Black Sabbath on a bass. So as long as we can do that, we're there. So I guess we're going to bounce around. We said this is a non-agendaed one. So for everyone joining, I'd love for you to take part, ask those questions that are important. Stuart, I've just seen you've joined. I know you've got some amazing insights around that world of internal comms, into HR, into engagement as well. So I'd love to hear from you as well as we're talking through. I've made some notes for myself, Emma, around what I'd like to talk to you about. And the first thing I think I'd like to talk to you about before we get into the guts of it is positive psychology. So One of the things I saw was that positive psychology is your gig, or that was the thing that you specialized in, you trained in positive psychology. And I googled it and said, what's the definition? And the first one that came up said human flourishing. So understanding where people can have positive experiences and where humans can flourish. And I wasn't going to talk about it, if I'm honest, but when I read that, I loved it, and I love stuff like that. But positive psychology, organizational psychology, it can't be the same thing. Is it the same thing?
Well, positive psychology is like an umbrella term for lots of different areas of psychology, but I think traditionally psychology is focused very much on a deficit approach. Like this idea, you go see a therapist, you go with one problem, you come out with 5 more, because that's the whole business model is built on, right? And psychologists were, I think, for many years really focused on fixing people and helping people that were subnormal. If we say, I'm going to use the word normal as a kind of, a shorthand here. I don't mean, you know what I mean by that. I'm not saying that's the right term, but subpar, shall we say, to get them back to sort of functioning. So, if I have, say, anxiety that prevents me from, getting on a bus and living a normal life, then psychologists can help me to overcome that. But for many years, psychologists kind of didn't talk as much about how to help people thrive. And there's as much to learn from what good looks like and how we can live our best lives as there is to taking that deficit approach. So it's very much a strength-based approach, a very much abundant approach. And it's all saying, actually, it's not enough just to kind of fix things that are broken and just be okay. We really need to be helping people to flourish and to thrive. And it's not about toxic positivity at all. So within positive psychology, we, areas like building resilience will come in there. So it's about kind of future-proofing ourselves so that when inevitably our lives are not kind of, always going to be amazing. We're going to have bumps and ups and downs, but we can work with people rather than waiting till something has gone wrong and fix it. What about building strength, capability, skills, so that when we do hit bumps in the road, we're better able to deal with that. So it's kind of that approach as well. So that really spoke to me in terms of organizational and occupational psychology, as a really great kind of range of tools to use inside organizations to help people, be their best.
Brilliant. I love it. And like there's always this, it's been a debate as old as time around, should we call HR? What's the name of it? And I wonder if we help humans to flourish and thrive. Maybe if that was the North Star.
Yeah.
How would we approach some other stuff? Now, often I start these webinars with, let's talk about the why and what we do. And I don't know if I'm going to, because we're going to be talking about employee engagement, employee experience, and we're going to be talking about all of that kind of stuff. And in my head, I kind of went, we don't really need to talk about the why. The people who are joining, people who watch this later, they probably understand why people should have a good experience at work. And actually, if we're trying to make a business case for employee experience, there's probably a fundamental problem elsewhere. And then I kind of went to myself, well, hang on a minute. I have lots of interesting conversations with people who say they do need to make the business case for creating a better employee experience at work, for investing in that. So I wonder, that might be my first question, is rather than the why of this, which I think we know the why, are we past making the business case, is my question.
I think unfortunately we're not. So, we've seen a downturn in the economy, at least in the UK and elsewhere, over the last sort of year, maybe 18 months. And it's disappointing that it's always the people side of the business that gets cut first. And I think those companies that don't do that, so that whole kind of piece around, observe the herd and do the opposite, right? Those are the companies that will thrive, right? They're the ones that will kind of come out of this mini recession that we're in at the moment and do really well. But it's disappointing that we always cut that stuff first. And I've seen that in my consulting business as well, that the kind of practitioners I'm speaking to are having budgets cut left, right, and centre. I was working with one client and we'd actually started the work, and she just came to me and said, I'm really sorry, I've just found out my budget's been frozen. So we're seeing budgets being frozen left, right, and centre, and teams being cut on the people side of the business, whether it's learning and development, internal comms, employee engagement, employee experience, OD, all those areas, people are kind of, losing jobs, and it's disappointing. So I still think, to answer your question, there's very much a business case to be made, because those companies that get that, they're the ones that are going to thrive and not just survive, they're the ones that are going to thrive, because they'll have that hard to replicate competitive advantage, and they'll be so far ahead of their competitors, because they understand that this stuff that we do is vital to your business performance and business health.
And I mean, it's interesting to hear that, because I guess we see it as a market that is coming out of a pandemic, as an economy coming out of a pandemic. And I can't really talk globally, but certainly if I think about the UK, you can see that there is a desire to invest in what's happening in the workplace when it comes to the people in the workplace. And I saw some data from the EX space, and I've seen some of our own data that suggests that one of the big friction points for practitioners is that budget and resources to deliver organizational strategy isn't there. And I guess trying to make that business case, and I don't think we're going to solve it on this webinar, because it's probably a bigger piece, and I'd love to hear from the people who've joined the webinar what they think, because I think there's too much, but there's a hackathon in this, isn't there? There's a day in a room that talks about, because I hear stuff like people in the people business talk in the wrong terms. They don't talk in business terms. People in business need to hear, talking about capital expenditure and return on investment, and you need to make a case for humanity. And there's a softness about me that says, if I have to make a case for humanity, that's awful. It's if I have to make a case for doing the right thing, that is terrible. So maybe we'll jump into a different subject. So maybe we'll do another topic as old as time. What is employee engagement? What is employee experience? What is people experience? Is it all the same thing? Have we all just had some rebrands that keep cycling? I know what I think, but I hear it all the time alongside the should we call HR, but is it employee engagement? And is there an answer to that?
Yeah, there's an answer, but it's not as straightforward as one would hope. I think when I researched my first book, which is handily titled Employee Engagement, back in 2014, even back then there were like 50 definitions of employee engagement and counting. I think we get too hung up on semantics. That there is a definition of work engagement, which is a reliable, valid, tested kind of concept Schiavelli and Baker kind of came up with, which is about engagement with the work, but there's not a single definition of employee engagement. Now, as an optimist, for me, I think this is fine, because actually we can figure out what we want it to mean in our organization. However we choose to define it, going back to your point about humanity, surely we can all agree that having a place where people want to come to work, want to work for, want to turn up, want to give their best work, enjoy being there, have fun at work, whatever, surely that's got to be a good thing. However we choose to define it. And some clients I work with, talk about, we just want people to have more good days at work. We don't have to overcomplicate this. But I think it's easy to hide behind the lack of a universal definition as a reason for not investing in it. And I had this really interesting conversation with someone a few years ago about saying, well, it hasn't worked because engagement hasn't improved. And I was like, well, that's like blaming the scales because you haven't lost weight because you haven't been sticking to your diet, right? It's like, and I could put my hand up and say that's me. It's like, it's not the measure. Measuring employee engagement is about progress. Actually, it's about what we do with our people, and surely it's the right thing to do. So for me, engagement is the outcome. We want a place where our people are engaged, however we choose to define that. And experience is how we get there. So employees have always had experiences, good, bad, and ugly. And now we're waking up to the fact that if we intentionally design great experiences, then guess what? We're more likely to have engagement. And this isn't a soft, fluffy thing. There's some really hardcore neuroscience that explains why it is that when our people have the opportunity to have great experiences at work, actually, that their brains react in a different way. So their brains have, release lots of different neurotransmitters, which essentially switch on the learning centers in our brain and mean that we are able to perform much better. So when we have a good experience, right, some really cool stuff happens in our brain, and we're able to, all the higher order cognitive function kind of is switched on. So we're able to better solve problems, we're able to make better connections, all that good stuff. So it's not just oh, that's a nice thing to have. It's actually some really cool stuff happening in the brain. So for me, intentionally designing great experiences for our people, whatever that means for them, and we can't make assumptions about it, will unlock engagement. And that's why we see all those amazing business outcomes that go hand in hand with, you know, engagement. When our people are feeling good about where they work, it's a very emotional thing, then we have these wonderful business outcomes. So that's kind of the I guess the kind of the link between the two. And I think the debate about employee experience versus people experience, I mean, I would rather say people experience. I know you've got the People Experience Hub. And the reason that I kind of still talk about employees, it's just shorthand, because if you talk about the experience of people, that for a lot of people that I work with, that can mean customers and employees. So I'm just using it as shorthand. But for me, I would much rather use the term people, because it's more human, it's more plain English, and I'm all about simplicity. So I love the fact you call yourself People Experience Hub.
Yeah, and thank you. And that was a really good description, because if I think about why we called ourselves the People Experience Hub, by the way, it was because our original vision was that there's more than your employees under your roof. You know, you've got the Sodexo team managing the facilities, you've got GXO coming in managing your haulage, and they're all experiencing the workplace. And it was a kind of view like that. But we also have to recognize what's the common vernacular out there. What do people call things? Because we're all locked into search engine optimization and what people are saying everywhere else. And I used to get really hung up on people co-opting stuff. Like, I'd see a company that would call themselves, you know, we are the employee experience company, and I'd be like, I understand what you sell, but you're not the employee experience. You're just part of it. No more. And Rob once said to me, like, they're no more the employee experience than a company that sells office chairs, because it's all about that full experience at work. And it kind of just makes sense as well. And I really love that whole piece around that we can describe engagement in what it means to us right now. So what does an engaged employee look like? And I just think it's interesting as well when you're looking at that and going, what does an engaged employee look like? We did some work with the NHS, and Nate Whittle-Price, you know, it's for KPMG. They previously at King's, they previously had a question which they asked people, which was, think about your last good day. What was happening? What made it a good day? Can you describe it? Think about your last bad day. What was happening? Without prompting people, without leading them down any other question route or any other questioning around what's going on at work, they were really able to get people talking about what made their day a good day was when they came away feeling fulfilled. When not it wasn't a hard day. It was a hard day. I had a really hard day. I've had a long day. I've had a tough day, but it was a good day. And they came away feeling that they could make a difference, that they enjoyed their job, they laughed with colleagues, laughed with patients, that they came away. And when they had a bad day, typically, and I'm remembering this now, so if Nate watches this in the future, I'm sure he can correct us, but typically when I had a bad day, it was when there was friction that stopped me, when there was a barrier that was a hurdle I couldn't get over and no one else could remove. You know, I couldn't enjoy my day. I couldn't be where I needed to be. And I just think, actually, that's a really good way of describing it. And when you said we just want people to come in and have good days at work. That fits.
I think it's a basic human right, you know, and I think I talk a lot about, you know, the age I'm at. I'm in my 50s now, and you know, I'm old enough to have seen a lot of changes in the workplace. And I just think, you know, the way that I experienced the workplace when I first started all those years ago, thank goodness the world has changed, and there's some stuff that happened back then that would not to be accepted now, and quite rightly so. And I just think the basic human right, why don't we want our people to come to work and have a good time? Of course we want them to. Not every day, there's going to be tough days, but as you said, I mean, I use as you know, one of the tools that we use a lot is the Best Experience Story tool, which is getting people to tell us stories about their best ever experience at work, and that unearths really rich insights in a way that it wouldn't, if you said to people, write down the 10 things you need to be engaged at work, I guarantee they come up with things like pay me lots of money and give me a big fat bonus and give me a nice coffee. But if you say, tell me about a time when you had a really great experience at work, that stuff never comes up. So they talk about things like, autonomy and work with great people, but they'll say it was difficult, it was tough, but I felt really good because I overcame a challenge, for example. So I think the way we ask the question is really, really critical. And I think it's a basic human right that people should have the opportunity to have, a good experience at work. Not every day, but at least on balance.
And I just and it goes back to human flourishing, which is, if what we did was, if we were servant leaders, if we were servant managers, if we were a servant team that said we are serving the people who work here and we are ensuring that they can do the job to the best of their abilities and have a great day, downstream and upstream there will be amazing results for us as a company. So even if you're a cash results driven company, then it makes sense. And it brings me on, I'd made a note about line managers, and I saw you did a webinar with Deborah Corey about bad bosses, and there was some stuff in there that really, it kind of spoke to me as well, because I've worked for some really bad bosses and I've learned from those bad bosses. I'm over the angst of it. I thank them for the experience and I now know how not to behave. So that's my learning that I've taken away. But again, looking at some of the data you shared previously, some of the data that came out of that, the impact of line managers, the biggest management population by far, they might not have the biggest impact on organizational strategy, but in delivering the experience most people have at work is line managers. But we've seen time and time again that one of the biggest barriers to a great experience at work is line manager capability. One of the biggest things that people want to get out there and start working on is enabling great line managers who can understand what they do and how they do it. And it's a massive barrier, but we just, and I made a note which said 67% said building line manager capability is a massive priority this year, and 3 out of 2 people said that the capability gap causes friction in the workplace. And it's huge. And I am genuinely worried if organizations are struggling with the resources and everything else, how are we going to turn the dial when what we're trying to do is help that big population go, what can people do? What can people do?
Well, again, I don't think it has to be as complicated or as overwhelming as people think. And line managed population get quite a tough time because, they get the blame a lot for, it's down to our line managers. And yet I think in organizations I think it's a massive opportunity to really up their game when it comes to supporting line managers. And I know it's a cliche, but it's true. It's a cliche for a reason, that people are promoted because they're technically good, not because they're necessarily great at managing or leading people. I think there are a few evil bosses out there, and well done for getting over yours. I still carry mine, as my husband calls it, my golden ball of pain. And I can get really ranty about the bad boss. I actually had 2 in my career, terrible bosses who said some awful things to me. But I think most managers are not evil bosses. Most managers want to do a great job, right? But they're like really busy. They've got loads going on. And then someone somewhere says, and also you've got to engage your people as well. And they're like, I don't even know what engagement is. And you've got to facilitate a great experience. Like, well, how the hell do I do that? It's quite overwhelming to do that. It's not straightforward. I mean, it is once you get into it. But if you're coming from the outside looking in, someone's just kind of, thrown this at you. Or, in your world, here's your dashboard for your survey, and thinking, I don't really know what this means. I don't know how to interpret it. Or even worse, I'm convinced I know exactly what this means. I'm going to do some stuff which is probably misguided as a result of this. So we don't support managers enough to do this stuff well. And for me, it comes back to positive psychology. So how do we give managers some really simple tools to allow them to have different conversations with their people about how it feels to work here? So it's not scary, because, if you think about the survey kind of process, is a good place to start, really. As a manager, suddenly you think, I want to do a really good job, but I've got these results and they're not that great. And I think that's down to me. And I'm quite scared by that. So straight away, I'm kind of going to a place of psychological unsafety. I'm quite worried and scared. And I'm just going to kind of try lots of different things to try to fix this. And it's never really going to give you the right results. So helping managers to understand that their survey results are just part of the jigsaw, and that this really starts in having different conversations about how it feels to work in their team, in their organization. And it doesn't have to be scary. You don't have to sort of say, oh, look, we're no good at X, Y, and Z, let's fix it. You can start by saying, I'm really interested to know from you about, you know, what good looks like for you. So tell me about a time when you had a great experience at work. What did that look like? What did it feel like? Okay, that's really interesting, because I guarantee what comes out will be, you know, things like autonomy and things like I made a difference, I had impact and get the job done, whatever. Okay, so now I know what good looks like for you, either as a team or as an individual. How can we work to getting more of that in place? That's a much safer conversation to have. It's very simple and straightforward and easy. Any manager could do that. And it kind of takes the sort of the complexity and the scariness out of this stuff. And I think we do, you know, as academics certainly, and within the people profession, you know, we do overcomplicate, and we do, you know, we do use terminology that really alienates people. It's not a very inclusive practice. I think we can just really set managers up for success by giving them a few simple tools and techniques. Say, here are some examples of how you can have a different conversation with your people, and you'll be just you know, unearthing that insight. You'll be fascinated to hear what good looks like, and then you can have a conversation about, okay, so if this is what's going on for you when you're at your best, let's talk about how we can create more of that in your day-to-day. That's such an easy conversation and so powerful.
I've got some stuff on that, but we've just had 2 great questions from some of our, I was about to say viewers, I don't know, webinar attendees. I don't know what the right word is. I'm going to say viewers because it makes me sound like I'm a host of something.
Hey.
You know, like Nick and Emma's Saturday Takeaway.
That'd be great, wouldn't it?
So I had a great question from Peter, which is, how can you expect a manager to give people a great experience if they are not having one themselves?
Yeah, totally, absolutely. So a lot of the work that we do, we do work with line manager populations, and have been doing since first started 15 years ago. And my first point of call is always, let's take your manager hat off for a minute, and let's talk about you as employees or colleagues or associates, whatever the terminology is, and let's talk about you and your experience at work first of all. So that's where this all starts. And I always tell the story about years ago, so I can tell it now because it's such a long time ago. I was working with the procurement board at Rolls-Royce. So literally like about, I mean, you can imagine how much they procure, right? Like billions of pounds, you know, massive multi-million dollar industry. So a lot of, I think it's about 19 men and 1 woman around a board table out in Derbyshire somewhere, arms folded, completely uninterested in me and what I could come along to work with them on for the day. And we did a lot of this stuff. So we talked about their best experiences. We talked about where they wanted to be. We talked about how they felt about work. And you could just see the light bulbs going on, and the energy in the room completely changed. And I actually had one person come to me and say, thank you. I hadn't realized how much I'd fallen out of love with my job, and I need to do some work on myself, because how can I expect other people to, you know, how can I help to facilitate this? Because it's not down to the manager either. The manager is there as to facilitate and have these conversations. They're not there to fix and do it for people. And I talk a lot about kind of the brave new world of EX and engagement. It's really about our own mindset. And this is not about victim blame. It's not about sort of saying to people, well, it's up to you. You've got to come to it with the right mindset. But also, again, as humans, we've got to take some accountability for how we show up at work, right? We've got to take some responsibility. And if things aren't working for us, got to think about, what do I need? What do I want? How can I have a conversation about this? And sometimes the answer is, I'm just in the wrong place, or I'm just in the wrong job, or I'm in the wrong team. And that's quite painful, but that might be the outcome. Or it might just be, I haven't really communicated this effectively. So we have to take some responsibility ourselves for how we experience work as well. It's not up there, not up to we shouldn't be sat there passively with arms folded going, come on then, manager and organization, make it great for me. We have to kind of meet people halfway.
I'll try and not swear, but so there's been plenty of times when I've worked for some difficult characters, and I was given some advice once when I said, you know, I'm working for this difficult character, I'm not having a great time at work, and it's filtering into the rest of my work and into the people that work for me. And I always remember there's a guy called Paul who said to me, one of the biggest challenges you have as a manager is that sometimes you have to filter out the bullshit and not let that bullshit hit your team. You have to take the bullet so that your team don't get that. And one of the biggest challenges you'll have as a manager is learning resilience, learning that you have pastoral care for the people that are working for you. Now, that's not pastoral care your mental health, your physical health, your experience of work be damned, but it is a view which says I have a level of care that I have to have for the people who work for me. But I also have to expect and experience myself, and therefore I have to have escalations, and I have to take that responsibility that says if I'm not having a great experience because of one person or multiple things, then I have to be brave enough to tackle that as well, and think that through. And it's a tough thing when you think about that, because you are suddenly talking about resilience and all the rest of it. And Stuart has asked a great question. Stuart has, as he always does, actually. He said he wants to ask a question of you, Emma, which is, do you think that everyone wants to be engaged at work? And he sees very few organizations, if any, ask people the question, that question. And the assumption organizations make is that everyone wants to. But do some people just want to come and do a fair day's work for a fair day's pay?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to that definition. So I'm going to have a bit of a ramble here. I take umbrage with the kind of the bias that we often say, we, not us, because we were great, but the industry often has with this field around, knowledge worker sort of bias, right? So for example, so there's some great models out there of like, this is the model of engagement or experience, and they might talk about tech and environment. And I'm like, well, I work with a company that make cast iron pipes in a foundry in Telford. I work with a Canal River Trust, who a lot of their people don't have an office. They're literally digging holes on the side of canals, right? The office environment does not feature for those people. And the other sort of jumping around a little bit here, this is why I have a problem with what I call big P purpose. This is kind of real. Now, I talk about meaning. I think we need meaning at work. Whatever we're doing, right, we need to have some kind of point to it, some sort of meaning to it. But this idea of big P purpose and like, Gen Z all need, whatever generation, every generation wants to have meaning at work, right? It's not a new thing. But I think about when I was a student, I was trimming lettuces, and that's an actual job. And it was like the worst job I've ever done. Literally 12 hours a day, 8 hours a day at a revolving table, taking a lettuce off, taking the outside, leaves off and chucking it down a chute. Right, if someone had tried to give me a big P purpose there and said, hey, you're helping to put salad on the nation's tables, I'd have felt really insulted by that. Like, mate, I'm just trimming lettuces because I'm a student and I need the money, okay? But did I want to have a good time at that job? Yes, I did, and I did enjoy that job because it was a really good laugh and I worked with really fun people. We made it good fun. The job was rubbish, I'm not going to swear. Don't try and dress it up, right? Because that's insulting. And there are a lot of people that do those sorts of jobs. That the job is rubbish. And in an ideal world, did they dream of becoming a lettuce trimmer when they were, having the careers conversation at 15? No, they probably didn't. But they'll get some sort of, so it might be the job itself isn't great, but they love the people they work with. They get treated well by the management. They maybe get some time off for their holiday, whatever it might be. So for me, it's not about, engagement isn't like this discretionary, always this discretionary thing. It's about actually, you know what? I go to work and I have some days where I really enjoy it and I get treated really well and I'm valued, and I might do this job that wasn't my dream career, but I'm all right with that and I'm at peace with it, and I have a good experience there. So for me, that's what I'm talking about. So there's a really good point. And we have this massive bias around shiny, sexy offices and tech. And don't get me wrong, of course, they're important for lots of careers, but there's a hell of a lot of people out there that don't have any exposure to that sort of stuff at all.
Yeah, I remember once saying to somebody that I could never work for an organization that does flash mobs. I just wouldn't have. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm all for having a great experience at work. But yeah, absolutely right. And I think about what Stuart's asking as well here, which is, I want to turn up. Because I do want to turn up. I want to turn up and I want to do a job and I want to get paid. I want to go home because maybe my priority is the things outside of work, and work is an enabler, and therefore work has to be an enabler. And it goes back then to those core, those bases of, if we stop talking about HR and we start talking about the health and safety executive, right? So you go and talk about HSE and say, what's their purpose in life? Their purpose in life is to ensure that when people go to work, they are safe, they can go home in the same state they arrived, typically, maybe better, that the workplace cannot do them physical harm, and that the laws are met. So we're talking about some very basic things that should be met, that health and safety It's transactional, but it keeps you safe. And when you go home, you're in the same state. You've got as many legs as when you turned up to work, and the machinery hasn't done you any harm. And I just think to myself, sometimes that's all you need. And I used to work for a manager. I'll call him Barry, because that was his name. And I loved working with Barry, right? And I worked with Barry when I was a forklift truck driver, and he was a line manager. And when I became a line manager, Barry was a line manager. And when I became a more senior manager, Barry was a line manager. And when I looked after the UK supply chain for various bits and bobs like HR systems, Barry was a line manager. I remember doing training to Barry as we implemented new technology. And all Barry wanted to do was be a line manager. But all he had in his personal reviews, all of his one-to-ones was, what's your development plan to become a shift manager? What's your development plan to move to ops manager? Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And all he wanted was to be a line manager. Yeah, I want to turn up every day and do the job that you pay me to do. And I want to do it as well as I can. And all this other stuff is really distracting. And it always stuck with me. And I actually, that's my storytelling part. And I love that, the obsession with big P purpose. And I'm like, you're absolutely right, and I wonder as people who are suppliers to organizations, we obviously have to shout loud, be heard, be seen. And we potentially are part of that problem, which is, what's the obvious thing that we're going to talk loudly about? We're going to talk loudly about employee engagement, engaged employees at work. We're going to not talk about those people who just want to turn up and take the paycheck. Of course, we want them to have a great time at work. We're going to talk about solving retention and fixing problems. And I think there's just that balance. And it kind of brings me on to personas. So Ted did a webinar with the team at Reward Gateway, and they talked about personas, and I was really interested in that. In our sales CRM, we use HubSpot. They have personas that you can put against people. They're buying roles and all the rest of it. And personas has been a really useful tool for thinking about roles. And I guess when you talk about personas and you talk about archetypes, well, I know within kind of the EX space you have 4 key archetypes.
Yeah.
Kind of how does that play out? Because when I think about EX practitioners, and I think about that real broad view, which is everybody has something to play in the employee experience at work. How do the personas that you've looked at, the archetypes that you've looked at, how do they play into that?
Yeah, so a couple of things in there. So if I just talk about the EX archetypes first of all, so that really came out of lots of conversations I've had over many years, is people, well, that's sort of probably 4 or 5 years, people sort of falling into the world of EX, which has been, I think the term was first sort of talked about like 8 years ago as a kind of actual, this is a job. And I have a lot of conversations with practitioners who are like, I'm feeling really overwhelmed because this is everything. And surely the employee experience is like everything that happens even before they've joined to after they've left. So I don't know where to start, and I'm feeling really overwhelmed. And what's my job? I don't even know what my job is, And to help kind of figure this question out, or perhaps sort of figure this out, we did a piece of research a couple of years ago where we interviewed about 35 practitioners who were doing great stuff, and sort of said, what you're doing, how's it working, where you're having success, what you're struggling with. And it was really clear there were kind of a number of different areas that practitioners were kind of working in, and the different areas required quite different skill sets and approaches. So you've got the EX architect, who is kind of that big picture thinker, who are looking at developing the architect, the blueprint, which is like, if you're going to build a house, here's the blueprints for the house you want to build. This is kind of, if you're going to build a great experience and culture, here's the blueprint. So we all follow the blueprint. We should end up with what we think we want to end up with. That's so kind of taking that metaphor in that way. And they're probably going to look after the survey. They're probably going to they're going to manage the stakeholders. They need to be really political. They're going to have to make that case for change. They're going to have to get investment. They're going to have to sort of see the big picture. They might never get down into the weeds of actually redesigning an onboarding experience, for example, but they're going to, much more kind of big picture. And then you've got the EX designers who are in the weeds of designing very specific experiences. So often they're kind of like life cycle experiences. So, our onboarding is broken. I always go to that one because that's the one that most people struggle with. our boarding's broken, or we know that exit's not working, or performance management isn't working for us, or whatever it might be. And we need to redesign it. And I've got my blueprint from the architect, or my strategy, if you like, but I think blueprint's a nicer way, because you can visualize that, where strategy feels very kind of abstract. Got my blueprint. Great. I kind of know what house we're trying to build, what sort of experience we're trying to build. So I now can design an experience that's going to align with that. And in that sort of archetype, you need to have design thinking skills. You need to, a bit of positive psychology is useful. So you quite a different skill set there. And then you've got your EX planners. So those are people who are sort of sitting in different areas of the business. So if you think about the house analogy, so the architects come up with the plan, and then you might have, your electricians, your builders, your plumbers. In the organizational world, you've got your internal comms team, you've got your L&D team, you've got your OD team, whatever it might be. And they're kind of going, okay, so I've got to translate the blueprint into my area, the bit I'm responsible for, to try and build this wonderful experience or this house we're talking about. So I'm going to take the blueprint, and I'm going to, in my L&D world, think about how we can bring that to life in the experiences we're designing, the learning experiences we're designing, or in internal comms, rather than it being very transactional as it has been for years, where I'm just kind of, not just, but I'm, thinking about audiences and channels. Now I'm thinking about the communication experience. I'm thinking much bigger. And now I'm thinking about, wow, I could actually really add some value to the communication experience in onboarding, or I can add some value to the communication experience in exit, whatever it might be. And I can think about the overall communication experience. So they're kind of translating those ideas into their functional area. And then you've got the builders at the very kind of front line who are actually making all this stuff happen, right? So they're translating all this and going, right, I've actually got to now, I've got the design on the onboarding. I'm actually now, procuring tech to, might need tech for a great onboarding experience, or I'm working with facilities to make sure that people have got the right kit on day one, whatever it might be. It's actually at the front line of this. So it's work in progress, and living the brand here, living the design thinking that we kind of talked to everybody about. It's about experimentation and iteration. So it's not set in stone, but it's like the first port of call to try to make sense of the different sorts of jobs that people were doing, and the different skills and capabilities that you might need. That was strength. We talk about strengths and skills. So you might say, actually, I'm really strong on the architect stuff, but I know nothing about redesigning experiences. So I need to kind of gen up on that. And what we found was that the profession is probably still quite immature at the moment. So most people are doing most things. Mm-hmm. And I think as we develop maturity, we'll find, people starting to much more kind of, hone in on one area, one archetype to kind of, develop their skills. And yeah.
And it's interesting because, I think when I looked at it, I was going like, well, and you saying like people are doing most things. I guess one of my questions was, there's different skills in each area, but I guess people are cycling through those, particularly in either less mature, not as in mature, but mature as in like a maturity model based maturity, which is we're not dedicated in this part, or actually some of the builder work has been done by our procurement team, and what we have to do is help them along that journey. So we're stepping into that builder role as well, and we're doing stuff. And I guess understanding that stuff can be a little overwhelming. If someone is feeling a bit overwhelmed by, I really want to start thinking about design from, architect through to delivery, like what's the soft start? How do people go gently into this and say, I'm gonna walk in intentionally but gently, help me not be overwhelmed?
Yeah, and I think that just trying to break it down for people, is what we've done here, so that people don't feel overwhelmed. And I think first of all, it's okay to have, quite a long-term roadmap on this, because you're not going to fix everything from day one. And I think following the kind of the EX framework that we talk about in the book it's a really beautifully simple framework that's actually got a lot of complexity baked into it, that kind of holds your hand through this. So you haven't got to feel like, oh, this is awful, where do we start? So we've got the 3 diamond model, which you talk about, which is scoping, opportunity and solution. And I think, in years of old, most of us, and I'll put my hands up here, and jump straight to solution, like onboarding is broken, right? What tools are out there? Oh, there's a shiny app, right, I'll put that in. Or, internal comms, right? Internal comms aren't working, right? What's the solution here? the beauty of the framework is it makes you, it kind of forces you to step back and really figure out what the problem is you're trying to solve. And that sounds really obvious, but so few of us do that. So the scoping diamond is all about what's our ideal and how do we measure up? And that might be our ideal overall experience. And the beauty of the framework is if you go, I don't know, then that's your trigger or that's your flag to go, let's go find out. So you haven't got to remember all this stuff. You go, what's our ideal? We might be talking about our ideal overall end-to-end experience, or we might be talking about an onboarding experience, but we say we don't know what our ideal is, right? Well, how do we answer that question? Who do we need in the room? Who are the right people to talk to? And how do we measure up? Well, we don't know, I've got nothing on that. Well, let's go and find out. So straight away, it's leading you to do the right things. That's the sort of scoping space. And then what's that human need then? So what is it we're actually trying to solve here? And then the middle diamond is all about empathy, about stepping in the shoes of the people you're designing for, which is for me is the fundamental shift from traditional HR to more of a people experience or employee experience approach is let's design for the end user, which is the employee. Let's think about their needs rather than us sitting in our ivory tower and thinking, we've got this great idea for a really funky, communication event or a new intranet or an onboarding program. Let's actually go out and spend some time with the people that are going to be experiencing this. And it's revolutionary, but it makes a massive difference, right?
And it sounds to me like, so I know the CIPD have been championing evidence-based HR. So take an evidence-based approach, which is about get your facts, make sure that you're researching this well, you're moving forward with intention, that you've got the data to move forward. And it feels like evidence-based HR moves into that framework really nicely. And I think like one of the things people struggle with is that go to solution. And I think we get conflict, or certainly my views, when I worked at Tesco, the view was, your role ultimately, let's say it was when I was doing people systems, my role wasn't to take people with me. My role was to get it done. Yeah. And what they were looking for was someone who's direct to solution, and that was me. So someone who could say, not only can I see the horizon, by the way, I'm standing on the horizon. By the way, hi, this is the horizon, everybody. By the way, it's done. Yeah. And now you can all run up and catch up and kind of now we'll train you. So we're not taking you on the journey. What we're doing is steering you to the destination that we've just designed. And it was probably right at the time, which was Tesco were the third biggest, second biggest, first, they're now the biggest, and all of a sudden, boom, away you go. And it was a need more than anything. But today, it's about definitely taking people on that journey and understand that framework. And I've been reading your book. So I went and bought a copy a few weeks ago. I was I'm kind of halfway through it. So it's the second edition of Employee Experience by Design with Belinda Ganaway. And I guess I had a question on the book. I don't want to do too much on that, but I think when I was reading through it, I was going, I didn't read actually the first edition. I apologize. But when you created the second edition, when you and Belinda were looking at this, what were the big changes, I guess, that you wanted to put in this edition? What had changed, and what was the timeline of that changed?
Yeah, I think this second edition came around pretty quickly because I think the world's moving on really quickly in this field, which is good. It's a good thing. So in the second edition, a number of different things. So I talked about best experience earlier. So I've got 15 years worth of qualitative data from best experience stories, and we updated this edition with kind of analysis of that to come up with the EX Lens. The EX Lens is a model that says we've got out of us pretty much thousands of people over the years. Tell us a story about your best experience at work, and we've analysed all that data. We had kind of an MPV MVP in the first edition, but in this edition we're able to kind of do it more justice. And also because of the pandemic, we added some more themes in that have come out since. So we added trust and belonging in. So that research sort of analysed that data and said, there are some universal themes that people kind of need to have a great experience at work, no matter where they are in the world, whether they're, China or Oman or EU. But there are also individual differences as well. That's what the model sort of says, this will get you halfway. The universal themes will get you halfway, but make sure you go and ask people, because there'll be things that are unique to individuals, to teams, to your organization. So it's not a kind of a recipe. It's like kind of half a recipe, if you like. So that's an update. We'd also developed, we've done some research with a bunch of practitioners around the maturity of this profession, and we developed a tool to measure that as well. So it's a really nice kind of diagnostic in the new edition, which is about how you can measure your own maturity. and obviously help to get you to the next stage as well. So look at things like, where do you focus your attention? What's your impact? So there are a couple of examples that spring to mind straight away. There are new case studies as well, better case studies that demonstrate, what people are doing and how they're really kind of taking this forward.
I mean, you said something then, and it stuck. You said a lot of things that stuck with me, but the one thing you just said then that struck me was universal themes will get you halfway there. And I genuinely think when I look at the world from, being somebody who ran, say, engagement surveys back in like 2010, to critical thinking people today asking, why is there a better way? What else could we do? How else could we do this? One of the things that I'm seeing more and more is definitely that universal model is no longer acceptable. Of, you can't just say, I'm going to ask 15 questions and unknit the entire world. You can't just say, of course, people who feel they belong are more likely to be engaged. That's not enough. It's totally. What's the lens in my organization? What's the lens in my finance team? What's the lens in high performing women in my production team?
Yeah.
And we start then taking us back down that persona route of saying, and you can ask, and I think what I was suddenly doing was connecting a few dots, and tell me if I've connected wrong here. And I was connecting those dots that say, when I move away from universal to specific, my organization, my people, those personas play in as well at that lower level, which is typically in my organization, high performing women leave because of these reasons. High performing women have a good day because of these reasons. And I don't want that to be like too broad. It's like you can start creating a persona that says, so where does that not help? Where are people not having that experience? But it is those universal themes. So that's my rambling little takeaway from that, and it's a thought more than anything. So rather than it being advice.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that, the universal themes that I can share with you, the white paper, the themes, they're what you'd expect, because they're about, human psychology. So, for example, belonging, there's an evolutionary psychological reasons why we need to belong, because if we weren't part of the in group, part of the out group, and we were less likely to survive. So we have an innate desire to belong to something, autonomy. No one ever says, I had a great experience at work because I was micromanaged. We need to, as human beings, we have a kind of desire to be autonomous. That's really powerful in us, so, as with most psychology, the universal themes are not rocket science and what you'd expect, but they're all backed up by really good evidence-based practice around. You'd expect to see these regardless of culture, demographic, anything else. They kind of show up for everybody. But going back to, I mentioned before about for me, we called the EX archetypes for a reason, because we talk about personas as well. They can kind of interchange the two, but we do a lot of work developing employee personas in organizations, which are kind of behavior based, sort of short descriptions of behaviors and other things that groups of people have in common. Now, years ago, when I first started using personas, they were kind of much more demographic based, like, no waffle William is based in Bridgewater, and he's 23 years old and he's first job after graduating, whatever. As we've kind of developed a skill in this area, as I've developed it and the team that I work with, we now do behavioral based personas, and the point of personas is not to put people in a box, it's to allow you to stand in the shoes of the people you're designing for. So it's just to really, again, that kind of nudge to go, hang on a minute, how would this group of people feel about this new onboarding process or this new performance management process? So it forces you to think about the people you're designing for. And as we've developed sort of the approach to this, now we have behavioral based personas. And I have to say, 9 times out of 10, the demographics do not feature at all. The only demographic two demographics tend to play out are tenure and what's the other one I was going to say? There's 2. Oh, whether they're a manager or not. Things like the age the people are, whether they're Gen X, millennials, or Gen Z, boomers, doesn't really make that much difference. A significant difference. Whether the people are based in Australia or different parts of the world doesn't seem to make much difference. And it's fascinating, because again, what you're doing is you're presenting back to the organization. They're evidence-based, they're based on a lot of in-depth, really rich research, qualitative and quantitative. So you say, this is the truth of what kind of combines people in your organization. So you tend to have, you know, for example, it might be a saboteur, you know, and saboteurs can come from anywhere, you know, regardless of the job they do or the age they're at. So that's been kind of a really big learning for me, I think, over the years, is behavioral based personas really allow you to stand in the shoes of the people you're designing for. And the demographics don't tend to play anywhere near as dominant role as you think they will when you start out on this journey.
That's incredible. That is incredible. And do you say there's a white paper on that, or is there a white paper on the universal theme stuff?
I've got a white paper on the EX lens. I've got some stuff I can send you on personas as well. So yeah.
I mean, are you happy for us to share that with
Yeah,
the
God,
people
yeah,
that have
absolutely.
attended as well? And we're coming into the last few minutes, so I guess as we wrap this up, obviously you do work with People Lab, and you're doing work now. We founded the EX space, enabling the EX era. How do you enable the EX era?
Yeah, so I love the consulting work that we do, but you know, that's where I get like a lot of my joy from work. But I just feel frustrated that we're barely scratching the surface, and I really want to share the love in terms of there's a better way to do this stuff. And here's, you know, here are some great case studies and learnings and courses, and I really want to professionalize this whole area of EX. So the EX space is a membership-based learning community where you can kind of become an accredited EX master. So it brings in all of my kind of learnings to date, the stuff from the books. I mean, I've also developed CIPD's engagement courses and the EX courses. So it brings in, you know, all of that great stuff, and it's all in one place. You can become an accredited EX master, and tools and templates and a community. So the idea is it's a place to bring like-minded people together to talk, share, collaborate, and get themselves qualified, so they really, you know, are able to use the latest thinking, the latest best practice. So that's what that's all about.
I guess it's, you know, I guess it's that as a consultant, you can help an organization, but in the X space, you can help everybody, and you can have better reach.
Totally, that's
Fantastic.
the dream. Yeah.
If people want to find out more about what you do, or they want to connect with you, where's the best place to do that? Where do you live and thrive?
I'm on LinkedIn. I don't know if I thrive on LinkedIn. I have a love-hate relationship with it. I kind of feel how my teenage daughter feels on Instagram, on LinkedIn these days. If you know, it's like comparing yourself all the time. But I am on LinkedIn. You can email me, emma@peoplelab.co.uk. I will say we've got a limited offer at the moment. If you want to join the EX space to celebrate the launch of the book, we're giving away free essentials level membership for 12 months. But it's going to be, that offer is going to be winding up in a couple of weeks. So make sure you kind of sign up now if you want to join the EX space. So yeah. I don't know if that's me losing connection or you losing connection. Oh, you're back.
It was me. It was me. My headset just decided it was going to go for an hour and then stop. It just stopped. But so apologies for that. And let's end on, you can choose. And Rob, my business partner, hates it when I do this. You can choose either your one thing you'd ask people to go away from this and do immediately, or you can choose an inspirational quote that you'd like to put out to the world.
Well, I've got to choose the former because I'm a woman of a certain age, and my memory's not what it used to be, so I can't remember a quote. But I think if there's one thing you do, I'd say go away and start having some best experience conversations, because they're really powerful. And even, you know, you learn something about yourself as well, but you think, actually, what was my best experience at work, and why was it so good, and why was it different to other times, and what can I learn from that? So you learn a lot about yourself as well. So I think it's a really powerful conversation to have. So go away and start having some best experience conversations.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Emma, for joining us. That was fantastic. And thank you, everyone, for joining the great questions as well. So goodbye. Have a great rest of the day.
Lovely to chat. Thank you for inviting me.
Brilliant stuff. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Take care. Bye.